Joerg. Good to see you here. So can you just give us some explanation, because before you mentioned a really good point about the space exploration, space mining. It's not just technology alone, but the entire supporting around it. Do you think, where are we on that? And would that really be materialized within our lifetime to see that happening?
I would certainly see this happening within our lifetime, although we have probably different lifetimes to go. But no, I think I think this will be we will see things happening within a decade from now. That's for sure. To what extent that's going to be kind of like really getting global commercial traction or being successful commercially, I really can't tell by now. But I think we will see more and different players targeting space mining, or let's say space resource exploitation as such. But as I said earlier, I think by the same time we need to make sure that we get the legal regulatory environment in place, and so getting rid of the white dots on the legal regulatory map, as well as to have a marketplace evolve to give those players a platform to trade their products. I think this is going to be very important. And it will take a couple of other stakeholders, all the way all the way to insurance and these type of things. So many other stakeholders will be there, and we will see several companies. And I think it will also take some sort of multiple players to diversify the risk and to address the different opportunities related to space resources.
Thank you for the answer about the space mining. I think the most important take on is the space mining is definitely going to happen in our generation, in our lifetime. So it's not something like happened 200 years, 100 years. It is going to be very soon. It will happen in our generation. That is the key takeaway. Okay, and how many space mining companies already out there? Are there any particular companies you feel very, very bullish? Any companies that we, investor, listener should close follow up on?
No, I mean, there were some. There have always been space exploration companies, and there were some prominent examples which found a lot of public attention a couple of years ago: Deep Space Industry and Planetary Resources. But there is Odyssey Moon. There's a couple others, and there's more recently, and there was Shackleton Energy. Now there is Upworld, but there's other ones. So, but I think for the time being, and there's many more actually. Some which are more prominent, some others a bit hidden. Some are in the making. Some have advanced a little bit. I think for the time being, it's really hard to assess and to see and to say who is out there and what makes sense. Nevertheless, I think it is worthwhile looking into this. Yeah. And all of those companies have something very good. It is about the right combination of things and at the right time. So I would be reluctant to give a verdict at that time, at this moment in time. But in general, I see this as something to come, also enabled by what we were talking about earlier, by these ISAM, because those are the systems and technologies and even subordinated business models and commerce in space, which really set the foundation for all this, which we do beyond.
What are type of companies that actually are working on this ISA initiative?
Well, that is a good point. So actually, many companies, major players, both startups, small, medium-sized, or middle type of size companies, and big companies are looking into this. And there has been DARPA at the time, which several years ago established CONFIRSE. And CONFIRSE is the industry consortium fostering ISAM. It was in the beginning meant to develop standards and rules of the roads
setting the scene for on-orbit servicing, but of course on-orbit servicing is much more than that. So it was on-orbit servicing OOS, then it was OOA for assembly, OOM for manufacturing, then on-orbit servicing assembly manufacturing. Now it's extended into all space, in-space servicing assembly manufacturing. DARPA initiated that consortium, which now has around about 80 members and counting from around the world. And so there is quite a broad awareness and interest in developing these sort of next-gen space infrastructure and services to enable all these type of things. So Converse and the last year has transitioned from an initially DARPA supported program to a fully independent private sector, a non-profit organization. Is global, and it has already submitted standards to the international standard organizations and is doing quite a good job. So what companies? I can only encourage people to go to the Converse website. You see around about 80 companies and you will see a lot of known names.
Okay. So when you say these Converse database, and so that is all the company that actually involved in this ISA initiative. Am I understanding correctly?
Well, it's not necessarily. ISAM is a part of the national strategy of the United States, and ISAM is an internationally recognized and now adopted term, which covers all these sort of things around servicing. We have now the first commercial services underway, which is life extension, to extend the life of satellites by bringing a space truck and then taking over station keeping. So this is sort of the first evolutionary step to do ISAM. But of course, there will be many more things, modular architectures, which you can service and maintain, repurpose, upgrade, as we said earlier. So there is multiple players all the way from small companies to big companies building entire end-to-end systems or providing little components or other capabilities or capacities to do these type of things, all boiling down to really next-gen future space infrastructure, which then will be the baseline and the foundation to do, for instance, resource exploitation and mining.
That's clear. Thank you so much.
It's a movement.
Absolutely. Since you have been actually VC literally late 80s and the 90s, it's really interesting with your background, right? Because you trained aerospace engineering and then went into VC, which is still, the 80s and the 90s. What I would like to ask you is, where do you see the current space VC theme? And do you think there's anything missing there?
Well, first of all, we have a broad range of VCs that invest in space. We have a couple of upper quartile funds from Silicon Valley, which have occasionally invested in space. We have some funds which are entirely dedicated to space. A prominent example from Europe is Seraphim, which is more kind of co-investing, and then we have the Japanese player Sparks, which is entirely set up to invest in space, and now with the second fund even going overseas or to invest in overseas companies. So, and then we have a couple of smaller ones, even smaller or other kind of space-related investment funds. The space agencies also themselves try to do these type of things. The first space agency in the world that did equity investments, not with the fund, but did that was CNES of France. And there were several attempts by NASA, which did not meet expectations and were resolved. ESA had a couple of activities, but there is via all these incubators and accelerators, there's many people investing in these type of things, also kind of migrating from other areas. Starburst has moved has extended from aviation into space, and there's many others. There's the Space Fund in the US. There is a Space Capital from a Space Angels Network, and so forth and so forth. So, there is many people out there these days. They're all of different flavors. It's hard to tell what is missing because it really depends on where such people are investing. In the beginning of new space, the attention was on big data, IoT type, basically data-driven businesses. Whereas then over the last couple of years, a lot of upstream investments took place and all these launcher companies got funded. With that also, but nowadays we see people kind of backing hardware, small subsystems and components, you name it. There is, by nature, from a VC perspective, there is no such space fund that can cover all. Because space, it has, and here comes a very important point to consider as a VC or from a VC perspective. A venture fund needs deal flow, quality deal flow. That means like in quality and in number, enough. There is no such space deal which is sufficient in number and quality in a certain segment, because the space sector is global, very diversified and fragmented. So the opportunity landscape related to space is very fragmented. Geographically, technically, market-wise, and so forth. Risk-wise, funding needs, and so forth. So that means that compared to kind of old guard, focused venture funds, let's say in Silicon Valley, there were funds which were looking exclusively into enterprise solution software, and they got kind of hundreds of deals per year and did 5 investments, 3 or 5. That, of course, is different. That does not exist in space.
Yet.
It does just not exist. On the other hand side, it is hard teams to invest, Therefore, space is still a very attractive investment opportunity, provided one goes for opportunistic approach. To take the one or other opportunity and then vertically do the right due diligence, involve the right experts and managing, screening, assessing, and managing the investment. So it's not just another VC fund, another software fund, another regional fund. No, because in no region is enough deals, in no area is enough deals, So it really depends, the individual case. And therefore space investing or equity investments related to space are very, very different. What is missing, so I would not question the capabilities of space investors. It depends just on what they do. And there's very interesting new players entering the scene. What is missing, though, is not related to the funds, is in terms of financing instruments. I think we're missing early stage mezzanine capital. Because many startups, smaller companies in the space arena having a hard time finding money. And with mezzanine and convertibles, as an example, you can defer the negotiation, or you can defer, but the company, first of all, the conversion, but also kind of make things performance-based, but you would allow companies to get funded in the first step. So that's one thing which is potentially missing. And another thing is that more like of a challenge these days, that many companies which successfully raised money in seed startup and round A are having a hard time finding next round investment. Because we saw a certain decline in equity infusion to the industry last year. That will consolidate and will probably pick up again. But for the time being, we're having those different shortfalls. That does not put in question whether space was an interesting or not interesting investment area. I think it is. It is certainly very interesting and has huge upside potential if done right.
Absolutely. No, I definitely echo what you're saying. Actually, the investment in space startups had more than halved into 21.9 billion in 2022. As compared to the year before.
Yes. Because
like what you said, that, the venture capital, the investor are there going after rather than the safer avenue stream, right? In the face of a green economy outlook. So I think while the investor is retreating from the space economy, and I think it's almost a reduction of 58% compared to 2021, I think we really would love to see more government to step in this very choppy environment, right? How do you see that? And particularly,
first of all, on the overall.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to add, particularly that U.S. and China. Well, China is massively invest into the whole space infrastructure. I think 8% of their GDP is invest into space infrastructure. So that is actually quite interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, this is a question which addresses several dimensions of space investment. So first of all, with regards to investors putting lesser money into space last year. So we have one thing to come yet is exits. Returns being generated for investors. So the community managed to get a lot of attraction and attracted a lot of money. Compared to other industries, certainly not much. But as for space, it has developed very well over the last couple of years, last 5, 7 years, 8 years. That's true. But there's many companies being funded, but there's very little exits. So those are to come. I think the decline in investment last year is based on many things. We have an afterglow from the pandemic in commercial terms. We have a changed geopolitical environment. We have the war since the beginning of last year. We have many decisions being deferred. Both in space and governments, etc., etc. So there is multiple influences which have caused this, apart from the fact that there was probably a natural consolidation taking place. We even see mergers between some companies. And of course, currently we are observing a hype with regards to new space, and there will be naturally a shakeout around the corner. In certain ways, we don't know to what extent and how, but it's not going to continue as it did, but it doesn't mean it wouldn't resume. So it is when a new sector evolves, these are typical developments. So that's one point. The other point is you were talking about the governments to take more responsibility or to investing more in these type of things. Governments do in different ways. They do very little with regards to kind of case-by-case equity investments. There are some instruments in Europe, in the US, other places where the governments really support this. Those instruments are kind of developing. They're not yet. No, they can be improved. Let's put it that way. And but at least it's shaping up. That's a good development. You were referring to China and kind of other superpowers putting money into space. Yes, heavily. The United States also. United States via various means and way beyond NASA as well. You know, the Space Force, the Air Force Research Lab, the Defense Innovation Unit. Many actors really support startups also, and kind of like going on a fast track for technology development. And that's happening everywhere. And more recently, we saw the announcement by Saudi Arabia of this massive commitment and investment into the space sector, at least budget-wise. Then we will see there will be a fund and there will be other things. So we see this happening. And yes, I think if there is a will and a commitment by the governments and at political level to bring space to the next level, then the governments should really take more responsibility also with regards to supporting investment. That does not necessarily say that governments, which are typically not in the business of investing, should invest or put equity up, but maybe develop supporting tools, matchmaking funds, or you name it, which then are managed or being used by professional investors or people knowing the industry. And but nevertheless, it will require a political commitment, which is not at the same level depending on the countries, the spacefaring nations. So there's quite differences in the interest in space, and that is what makes it at least not easy and is a bit unpredictable for the time being. But in principle, I would agree that there is a duty, in a way, a duty for the governments to support space commercialization and startup entrepreneurship and these type of things more than they do as of now.
Thank you very much. And that almost leads to my next question, that apart from US and China, these two superpowers, we also know Luxembourg, and you just mentioned Saudi, UAE. They are very progressive in terms of space. They have like space law. Not China, but the US, Luxembourg, UAE seems to have space law, and they invest huge amount of money into the space and space development. I mean, who else? What other country you think should try a bit harder with their current set of resources already have?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. One is what countries do that, and the other thing, what actors do that based out of which country. And Luxembourg is a special case and is basically unique because with a program that doesn't really conduct space missions, but supports the development of a favorable environment to attract and to build a homeland for spaceborne space companies, is a different approach to most space agencies. And that's associated with having an adjacent fund to this and these type of things. So that is and having the law in place, the structure, and basically fostering economic development of space in a country. It's a very unique approach, and what is even more unique, though, is the fast pace by which they realize that. That is impressive. While Germany is working on the space law for ages, just in comparison, it's just next door. So these things are different. I think the progressive ideas come from players in the United States, in China, some in Asia, and there's even ideas in South America, Middle America, and in other places. So. We will have to see, because at the end of the day, if that business is to be pursued commercially, then the companies will go to the places where they can flourish as a company. So it doesn't really mean where they are today, because the business will go where the environment works and where the commerce can flourish. So there is no such, let's say, heaven for a space resource business or mining. We will see how it goes.
I do agree. But certain countries have massive advantage, right? For example, my home country, Singapore, close to equator, have great tax, banking, law, ruling law. And it would be great if they actually also have a national space law, and that could easily attract a lot of space startup. At the end of the day, I think once a country build up that ecosystem, it attract a great company, great minds to be there. Then it doesn't matter small or big, they are on the earth, but they could be really one of the top leading countries in the space, right? So I think I definitely look forward to that. Okay, we talked about the institution, we talked about the government. So as a private investor, as a private individual, if they are super excited about space, what instrument out there actually they can participate to invest?
This is a good and extremely difficult question. I think we said that space is certainly, or can be certainly, an area worthwhile investing. It's very exciting as it combines investment, commercial opportunities, with the flair and the opportunities and the enthusiasm and the benefit for humankind of space. Okay? Yeah. So that is unique. So if somebody feels comfortable in this spheres, then of course where to invest takes the personal understanding and receptiveness for certain topics, but certainly a close interaction with professionals who have, depending on what case is on the table, or give them advice, or can go vertical, assessing certain opportunities. There is no such straight way forward. It also depends a bit the ticket size. It also depends the risk appetite. I mean, what stage of life cycle of development of a company you want to be in? What area is attractive? I mean, if somebody says, I want to have stuff which is the future of the world, and I want to be involved with, I don't know, mining things on the asteroids, and can basically deal with a certain risk, okay, but somebody else may say, I want to be part of this, but I want to be sure I would be more comfortable with sort of subsystems and components which come in series, which enable this whole infrastructure. Then it's a smaller ticket and it's less risk and it's a shorter realization time frame.
Yeah.
That's a different story. And then we have all these other things, all the way to business, which is very much blended into terrestrial economy, as I said in the beginning, satellite downstream application ICT, all the way to end user equipment. This is something like a garage startup in the IT industry. It depends. It's very much, and here comes the most important thing in my view. There has to be this link with the personal expectations and capabilities. Because again, there is no such space investment.
So thank you for actual range.
There are single opportunities.
Yes, definitely. I think you rightly point out how space as industry will have massive benefit for the life on Earth and how it's going to be beneficial both in terms of technology development to advance the technology on the Earth, but actually making the life better here. And yes, you are right, depending on the ticket size, there might not be a lot of retail product out there, although there is some ETF. It's combined quite a lot of list stocks, but then it's a basket case, right? It's not necessarily new space. It's a lot of very, very established company like a Boeing and all these, which is a large aerospace industry companies, But in terms of new space, obviously we have a SPAC, but unfortunately with the later economic situation, the SPAC, they also have massive volatility. So then we talk about the VC funds, and that's not really accessible for a lot of normal people. And my hope is one day that, there will be a tokenized instrument where normal people could put on 100, 1,000, 5,000, maybe small chip of money, but they can participate in this trend. And that is definitely what I hope, and that's something could happen in the near term, right? So it's not just the well-to-do, it's not just the ambitious billionaire will be benefit out of space industry, but vast majority as well. So we definitely look forward to that. Well, that almost bring us to the final part of this podcast. And thank you, Joerg, so much for a lot of inside knowledge. And I just want to ask you the last question. What will be your key message, key takeaway you want our listener to bring back? Maybe just a very, very brief sentence.
So the message is a kind of a multiple message in short terms is, first of all, there is no such clear recipe about space investing or space investment. Or there's no clear path. It depends. It's a case-by-case thing. Space remains risky as an investment area, but it has tremendous upside potential if done right. Important is to deal with the right people and trying to understand vertically, case by case, what's on the table. And last but not least, the next big thing is future space infrastructure and logistics with all the subordinated business models and investment opportunities associated to them.
Thank you. So basically the key takeaway is the industry offers tremendous opportunity, and it's clear that's going to be such a transformational for humankind and for I think probably the biggest economic revolution ever. However, for listener and for investor who want to invest into that segment, I still need to bear in mind the risk, a lot of startup, yes, might not survive. It's a statistic game. And with the boom of this industry, there will be volatility as well. And that's something everyone should keep in mind. But still, if one, put 1% of their portfolio into space and ride the uptrend, and that will be phenomenal when we, 20 years, 30 years looking back, that will certainly be a good investment. So thank you so much, Joerg. Thank you for today's interview. And if our listener want to find you, where is the best place? Is that Twitter? Is that LinkedIn? Where can they find you to give you any comments, any feedback?
Either way, go via LinkedIn and look at the profile and find the contact on. You can find me in different ways. And I also very much appreciate the invite, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.